Josh Richards pushed open the bedroom door, his work boots still caked with machine oil from the double shift. The August heat had followed him inside, but the house carried a different kind of warmth, the stale air of a sealed room, windows closed against the afternoon sun. His wife Myrna lay sprawled across their bed, one arm dangling off the edge, her blouse unbuttoned and twisted around her torso. The fitted sheet had been pulled completely off the mattress, bunched in a corner like discarded tissue paper. The men's watch on his nightstand caught the light. Silver links, expensive. Not his. Josh stood motionless in the doorway, his pulse steady despite the scene before him. 12 years as a game designer had taught him to observe, to piece together narratives from scattered clues. He noted the 2 wine glasses on the dresser, both smudged with lipstick. The closet door hung open, revealing his hanging shirts pushed to one side. A men's leather shoe peeked from under the bed, brown Oxford, size 11. Josh wore a 10. He pulled out his phone and photographed everything. The watch, the glasses, the shoe, Myrna's half-dressed form. He moved quietly, documenting angles and details with the methodical precision he usually reserved for debugging complex game mechanics. When Myrna stirred, mumbling something incoherent, Josh backed out of the room and descended the stairs. In his home office, he sat at his computer and transferred the photos to an encrypted folder. His hands didn't shake. His mind had already shifted into a different mode, not the grieving husband, but the puzzle master. Every game had rules, win conditions, and consequences for failure. This game had just begun, and Josh intended to win. The watch bothered him most, not because it represented infidelity, that was obvious enough, but because he recognized it. The distinctive square face, the platinum band. He'd seen it before, recently, catching light across a conference table. William Gillespie wore that watch. Josh opened his laptop and pulled up his company records. Gillespie was his business partner, the man who'd stood beside him at his wedding, who'd called him brother for 15 years. They'd built Labyrinth games together, from a cramped apartment to a downtown office with 20 employees. Gillespie handled marketing and finance, while Josh designed the games that had made them successful. Josh pulled up their shared business accounts, something he rarely checked since Gillespie managed the financial side. He scrolled through recent transactions, his designer's eye-catching patterns. Large transfers to a consulting firm he'd never heard of. Payments to vendors that didn't match any projects he knew about. The amounts were small enough to avoid immediate attention, but consistent enough to matter. His phone buzzed. Myrna, awake now, texted, "Why are you home early? Thought you worked till 6. Josh typed back, "Supervisor sent us home." Broke the main assembly line. "Where are you?" "Just waking up from a nap. Long morning. I'll start dinner." He set the phone down and returned to his computer. The consulting firm led to a shell company registered in Delaware. The owner, William Gillespie. Josh leaned back, the pieces connecting. This wasn't just about Myrna. This was about money, about trust, about a man who'd been systematically hollowing out their company while sleeping with his wife. Footsteps creaked overhead. Water ran in the bathroom. Myrna would shower, dress, and come downstairs wearing whatever mask she'd been wearing for however long this had been happening. Josh wondered how many times. How many Saturday mornings when he'd left for his weekend maintenance job, the second income they supposedly needed to save for the house renovation Myrna kept talking about. The house renovation. Josh pulled up their joint savings account. The $40,000 they'd accumulated over 3 years had dwindled to $8,000. The withdrawals bore Myrna's authorization, small amounts over 6 months. Furniture deposits, she told him. Material costs. All eyes feeding into William Gillespie's pocket through various schemes Josh was only beginning to unravel. His phone rang. Gillespie's name appeared on the screen. Josh answered, his voice easy. "Bill, what's up?" "Hey, brother. Listen, I need you to sign off on that vendor contract for the new server setup. Send it to your email. Pretty straightforward, but the company needs an answer by Monday." "Which vendor?" "Tech Core Solutions. We talked about them last month, remember? They're giving us a great deal on cloud infrastructure." Josh hadn't heard of Tech Core Solutions until 30 seconds ago when he'd seen them in the fraudulent transactions. Right. Send it over. I'll review tonight." "Perfect. And hey, sorry again about missing last week's meeting. Had a family emergency." "No problem. Everything okay now?" A pause. "Yeah, all handled. See you Monday." Josh hung up and pulled up the TechCore contract. It authorized a $75,000 initial payment for services that, from Josh's technical reading, were either wildly overpriced or entirely fictitious. The contract required both partners' signatures. This was the endgame, the big score Gillespie had been building toward. Myrna appeared in the doorway, hair damp, wearing a sundress Josh had bought her last Christmas. "Hey, baby. Rough day at work." "Just tired," Josh said, closing his laptop. "What's for dinner?" "I was thinking pasta, unless you want to order in." "Pasta sounds good." He watched her move around the kitchen, pulling out pots and ingredients, humming some pop song he didn't recognize. She seemed relaxed, comfortable, unburdened by guilt. Josh wondered what story she'd constructed in her head to justify everything. What narrative let her sleep beside him at night while planning futures that didn't include him? After dinner, they watched a movie. Myrna fell asleep against his shoulder 20 minutes in, her breathing deep and even. Josh stared at the television without seeing it, his mind constructing a different kind of game, one with permanent consequences. By Sunday evening, Josh had assembled a complete picture. He'd installed monitoring software on their home computer, legally, since he owned it, and reviewed Myrna's messages with Gillespie. The affair had started 8 months ago at a company holiday party. Gillespie had been recently divorced, drinking too much, complaining about alimony. Myrna had comforted him. The comfort became something else. The messages revealed their plan: bleed Labyrinth Games dry through fake vendors and inflated contracts, then dissolve the partnership with Gillespie taking the liquid assets while Josh was left with debts and obligations. Myrna would divorce him, claiming his work hours and emotional distance made the marriage untenable. She'd get the house, half of any remaining assets, and presumably move in with Gillespie, who'd emerge from the company's collapse mysteriously solvent. Josh read their messages with clinical detachment. Myrna called him clueless and boring. Gillespie joked about how easy it had been to manipulate someone who trusted too much. They mocked his weekend maintenance job, the extra income Josh had taken on believing it would build their future together. The final message from Friday night made Josh's jaw tighten. "Tomorrow noon? Josh works till 6. We'll have hours." He screenshotted everything, backed up the files to multiple secure locations, and began designing his countermove. Monday morning, Josh arrived at the Labyrinth Games office at 7, 2 hours before anyone else. He'd spent the previous night reviewing every contract, every vendor agreement, every financial document from the past year. He now understood the full scope of Gillespie's scheme. Nearly $200,000 siphoned through various fraudulent channels. Josh pulled up the TechCore Solutions contract and signed it, but not before making several subtle modifications. He changed the payment authorization to require not both partners' signatures, but verification from their external accountant, a detail buried in subsection 3.7 that most people wouldn't notice. He adjusted the payment timeline, the termination clauses, and added language that made Gillespie personally liable for any fraudulent claims. Then he called their company attorney, Brent Cochran, a sharp-eyed man who'd incorporated Labyrinth Games and had handled their contracts for a decade. "Brent, I need you to review something. Confidentially." They met for coffee at 8. Josh laid out everything. The fake vendors, the shell companies, the personal connection between Myrna and Gillespie, the messages plotting his downfall. Brent's expression darkened as he scrolled through the evidence on Josh's tablet. "This is fraud," Brent said. "Serious fraud. You could file criminal charges." "Not yet," Josh said. "I need something else first." He explained his plan. Brent listened, occasionally raising an eyebrow, then nodded slowly. "It's legal. Barely. But it'll work." They spent the next hour drafting documents. By the time employees started arriving at 9, Josh had everything in place. Gillespie strolled in at 10, coffee in hand, expensive watch glinting. "Morning, brother. You signed that TechCore thing." "I did," Josh said. "Send it to Brent for final review, though. He wanted to check some liability clauses." Gillespie's smile faltered. "I thought we agreed to fast-track it?" "We did. This is fast-tracked. Brent will have it done by tomorrow. The vendor's deadline is Monday, right?" "Right." Gillespie shifted his weight. "Yeah, tomorrow's fine." Josh watched him retreat to his office, saw him pull out his phone immediately. 10 seconds later, Josh's monitoring software alerted him to a message from Gillespie to Myrna. "Lawyers reviewing the contract. Might have a problem." Myrna replied. "What kind of problem?" Don't know yet. Stay calm. I'll handle it. Josh spent the day working on his latest game design, a complex puzzle adventure called The Architect's Revenge. His team brought him problems and solutions, unaware their boss was solving a much darker puzzle in parallel. Around 3, his lead programmer, Ronnie Abbott, stopped by his desk. Hey Josh, you seen the server logs from last week? Someone accessed the financial database from an external IP. Josh looked up. Wednesday night, around midnight. Used an admin login. Only 3 people have admin access, Josh said. You, me, and Bill. Ronnie nodded. I know. Just thought you should know. Thanks, Ronnie. Can you pull the full access report? Everything from the last year. Sure thing. By 5 o'clock, Josh had another piece of the puzzle. Gillespie had been accessing their financial systems remotely, often late at night, probably from home or from Josh's house, while Myrna kept Josh distracted or away. The pattern was clear. Gillespie would access the system, create a payment authorization, and then cover his tracks by deleting logs. He'd made one mistake. The backup logs Ronnie maintained separately for security purposes had captured everything. Josh went home at 6. Myrna greeted him with a kiss and a question about his day. Josh told her about the game design, about a difficult puzzle he was working through. She listened with feigned interest, checking her phone twice during dinner. I'm going out with Elaine tomorrow night, she said. Girls' night. Is that okay? Elaine Ballard was Myrna's best friend, a dental hygienist who'd been her college roommate. Josh had always liked Elaine, sharp, funny, honest. He wondered if she knew about the affair. Sure, Josh said. I'll probably work late anyway. Big deadline coming up. The TechCore thing. Josh paused. He'd never mentioned TechCore at home. Yeah? How'd you know about that? Myrna's eyes widened slightly. Didn't you mention it? Maybe. I can't remember. Josh shrugged and returned to his food. But he'd seen the flash of panic, the recognition that she'd revealed knowledge she shouldn't have. That night, after Myrna fell asleep, Josh sat in his office reviewing the final elements of his plan. He discovered that Gillespie's ex-wife, Sandra McLaughlin, had divorced him not over the usual irreconcilable differences, but due to his affair with a client and financial irregularities she'd discovered in his personal accounts. She'd settled for a fraction of what she deserved because Gillespie had hidden assets and threatened a lengthy legal battle she couldn't afford. Josh called Sandra. They'd met once, briefly, at a company event years ago. Mrs. McLaughlin? This is Josh Richards, Bill Gillespie's business partner. I remember you. Her voice was cautious. What do you want? I want to talk about your divorce settlement. I think you deserve to know what your ex-husband's been doing with his business. They talked for 40 minutes. By the end, Sandra understood that the man who'd claimed poverty during their divorce had been systematically stealing from his own company. She understood that Josh was about to expose everything and that she might be able to reopen her divorce settlement with new evidence of hidden assets. Why are you helping me? She asked. Because people who betray trust shouldn't get away with it, Josh said. And because you seem like someone who got hurt by the same man who's trying to hurt me. I want copies of everything. You'll have them. Tuesday morning arrived with autumn rain, the kind of gray drizzle that made everyone move slower, think hazier. Perfect weather for springing traps. Josh arrived at the office early again, meeting Brent Cochran in the conference room. They reviewed the final documents, the modified TechCore contract, the forensic accounting report Brent had commissioned overnight from a colleague, the compilation of fraudulent transactions, and the partnership dissolution agreement Josh had drafted. At 9, Josh called a mandatory meeting for all senior staff. Gillespie, Ronnie Abbott, their head of marketing Jerry Frederick, and their HR director Molly York. They assembled in the conference room, coffee in hand, curious about the sudden summons. Thanks for coming, Josh said. I've discovered some irregularities in our finances that need immediate attention. Gillespie leaned back in his chair, projecting calm. What kind of irregularities? Josh connected his laptop to the room's display. Spreadsheets appeared, highlighted in red and yellow. Over the past 8 months, approximately $200,000 has been transferred to fake vendors and shell companies. The payments were authorized through administrative access to our financial database, bypassing our normal approval process. The room went silent. Jerry Frederick leaned forward, studying the numbers. Molly York's expression shifted to alarm. Ronnie nodded grimly. He'd suspected something after pulling those server logs. Gillespie's face remained neutral. That's serious. Do we know who's responsible? I do. Josh advanced to the next slide, a web diagram connecting the shell companies to their owners, with William Gillespie's name at the center. These companies are registered to you, Bill. The payments were authorized using your admin credentials. And the TechCore Solutions contract you pushed me to sign last week? That was going to be the final score, $75,000 for services that don't exist. Gillespie stood up. This is insane. You're accusing me of theft. I'm not accusing. I'm stating facts backed by documentation, server logs, financial records, and testimony from our accountant. Josh nodded to Brent, who slid a thick folder across the table to Molly York. This is for HR. Everything's documented. You're trying to frame me, Gillespie said, his voice rising. This is some kind of setup because you're sleeping with my wife? Josh said calmly. The room's temperature seemed to drop. Jerry Frederick's jaw actually fell open. Ronnie closed his eyes. Molly York looked between Josh and Gillespie like she was watching a car crash. Gillespie's composure cracked. You don't know what you're talking about. Josh pulled out his phone and sent a file to the conference room display. Messages appeared, the conversations between Gillespie and Myrna, time-stamped and explicit. Plans for afternoon meetings at Josh's house. Jokes about his obliviousness. Discussion of the financial scheme and the timeline for the partnership dissolution. I know exactly what I'm talking about, Josh said. You've been stealing from our company while having an affair with my wife. You plan to drain our accounts, dissolve the partnership, leave me with the debts, and ride off into the sunset. The only problem is that I'm better at designing games than you are at playing them. Gillespie's face flushed red. Those messages are private. You can't. They were sent from our company-owned devices during work hours, Brent Cochran interjected. Completely legal to monitor. Also, several of these messages discuss criminal fraud, which removes most privacy protections anyway. Josh stood. Here's what's going to happen, Bill. You're going to sign a partnership dissolution agreement that makes you personally responsible for every dollar of the fraudulent transfers. You're going to return all stolen funds within 30 days. You're going to resign from the company immediately with no severance, no benefits, and no equity. And you're going to do it all before I file criminal charges with the DA's office. And if I don't, then I file the charges today. You'll be arrested for fraud, embezzlement, and theft. The evidence is overwhelming. You'll lose everything in legal fees before you even get to trial, and then you'll spend several years in prison. Your choice. Gillespie looked around the room, searching for an ally. He found none. Jerry Frederick had turned away, disgusted. Molly York was reviewing the HR folder with growing horror. Ronnie Abbott simply shook his head. I need to call my lawyer, Gillespie said. Good idea, Josh replied. You have until 5 o'clock today. After that, I go to the police. Gillespie left the conference room, his expensive watch catching the fluorescent light one last time as he grabbed his coat and walked out of Labyrinth Games forever. Josh arrived home at 7 that evening to find Myrna in the living room, crying. Her phone lay on the coffee table, screen still lit with messages from Gillespie explaining that everything had fallen apart, that Josh knew, that it was over. How could you? She said when she saw him. How could you do this to Bill? Josh set down his briefcase. How could I do this to Bill? I'm not the one who betrayed anyone, Myrna. He loves me. We're going to be together. No, you're not. Josh pulled out a folder from his briefcase. Bill signed the dissolution agreement this afternoon. He's returning every dollar he stole, plus interest. He's personally liable for $200,000 in restitution. He's broke, Myrna. Whatever future you thought you had with him just evaporated. Myrna stood, her face twisted with anger. This is your fault. You're never here. You work all the time. You don't pay attention to me. I worked all the time because you said we needed money for the house renovation. I took a second job on weekends so we could save. And while I was doing that, you were spending our savings on your affair and helping Bill steal from my company. I didn't know about the stealing. Josh opened the folder and showed her the messages. These are your words, Myrna. How much longer until you can close the TechCore deal? Make sure Josh doesn't look too closely at the consulting payments. You knew everything. Her face went pale. You hacked my phone. I monitored our home computer, which I own. Everything you sent from this house is logged, and it's all admissible in divorce proceedings. He handed her a second set of papers. I'm filing tomorrow. You can keep whatever personal items you brought into the marriage. Everything else stays with me. including this house, since you spent our joint savings without my knowledge or consent on an extramarital affair. My lawyer says that's pretty clear-cut. You can't do this. It's already done. Josh walked to the stairs, then paused. You can stay tonight if you need to pack, but I want you gone by tomorrow evening. If you're not, I'll have the locks changed and your things moved to storage. He went upstairs to the guest bedroom and closed the door. His phone buzzed with a message from Sandra McLaughlin. My lawyer reviewed the documents. We're reopening the divorce case. Thank you. Another message came from Brent Cochran. Gillespie's lawyer confirmed he'll comply with all terms. Payments start next week. You did it. A third message, unexpected, from Elaine Ballard. Myrna just called me crying. I've been telling her for months to stop seeing Bill. She wouldn't listen. You deserve better than what she did. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. Josh set down his phone and looked out the window at the street where he'd lived for 8 years, in the house he believed would hold his future. The future looked different now, emptier in some ways, but cleaner. Honest. By Wednesday afternoon, Myrna had moved out, taking only her clothes and a few photographs. She left her wedding ring on the kitchen counter with no note. Josh picked it up, studied the gold band for a moment, then dropped it in a drawer. Someday he might pawn it, or melt it down, or throw it in a river. It didn't matter. At the office, the team had rallied. Ronnie Abbott had taken over Gillespie's clients, rebuilding relationships damaged by the upheaval. Jerry Frederick had drafted a press release positioning the partnership change as a strategic realignment. Molly York had handled the HR implications, ensuring no other employees were involved in Gillespie's schemes. Josh spent Thursday restructuring the company's finances, working with Brent to establish better oversight and control. They hired a forensic accountant, Abraham Herring, to conduct a full audit and ensure no other irregularities existed. Abraham found the books surprisingly clean except for Gillespie's fraud, a testament to how contained the scheme had been. He was careful, Abraham said. Methodical. If you hadn't caught him, he might have gotten away with it for another year or more. But I did catch him, Josh said. That's what matters. Friday brought unexpected news. Gillespie had been arrested. Not for the fraud against Labyrinth Games. Josh had held off filing those charges as leverage, but for theft from TechCore Solutions itself. The shell company he'd created had apparently victimized an actual business that shared the name, and they'd pressed charges when fraudulent contracts appeared in their systems. Josh called Brent. Did you know about this? I might have mentioned the shell company name to a business associate who might have mentioned it to TechCore's actual legal department, Brent said carefully. Funny how these things work out. Josh smiled. It was the first genuine smile he'd managed all week. Thanks, Brent. You're welcome. And Josh, for what it's worth, you played that perfectly. Not many people could have kept that cool under pressure. After hanging up, Josh returned to his computer and opened the game file for The Architect's Revenge. The puzzle he'd been designing all week had come together beautifully. A complex maze where the player had to use observation, patience, and strategic thinking to turn the antagonist's own traps against them. The final level revealed that the architect had been planning the revenge for the entire game, laying groundwork in earlier levels that paid off in a satisfying conclusion. Art imitating life, Josh thought. Or maybe life imitating art. The following Monday, Josh called an all-hands meeting at Labyrinth Games. The entire staff gathered, nervous and curious after a week of dramatic changes and rumors. I want to thank everyone for your professionalism during a difficult time, Josh began. As you know, Bill Gillespie is no longer with the company. What you might not know is that his departure was due to financial fraud he committed against us all. He was stealing from the company, and when I discovered it, I gave him the choice to make restitution or face criminal charges. He chose to make restitution. He paused, looking around the room at the faces he'd worked with for years. I also want you to know that this company is strong. We're financially stable, we have great projects in development, and we have the best team in the industry. Bill's actions don't change any of that. If anything, they've shown me how resilient and capable you all are. Ronnie Abbott raised his hand. What happens now? With the partnership structure? I'm buying out Bill's remaining equity at a fair market value, minus the restitution he owes. Starting next month, Labyrinth Games will have a new structure. I'll retain majority ownership, but I'm establishing an employee profit-sharing program. Everyone in this room will have a stake in our success. The mood shifted immediately. Smiles appeared. Someone started clapping, and others joined in. After the meeting, Ronnie approached Josh's desk. That was a good move with the profit sharing. People need to know they're valued. They are valued, Josh said. Bill forgot that. I won't. Over the next month, life settled into a new rhythm. The divorce proceedings moved forward smoothly. Myrna's lawyer had reviewed Josh's evidence and advised her not to contest anything. She signed the papers without a fight, probably relieved to avoid having the details of her affair and involvement in Gillespie's scheme exposed in court documents. Sandra McLaughlin's divorce case reopened with new evidence of Gillespie's hidden assets. Her lawyer was optimistic about a favorable settlement that would recover years of unpaid support. Gillespie himself remained in legal trouble on multiple fronts. The TechCore identity theft case, potential charges from Labyrinth Games that Josh kept as leverage, and Sandra's civil suit. His expensive watch had been sold, Josh heard, to pay legal fees. On a Friday evening 6 weeks after that Saturday discovery, Josh sat in his home office working on the final level of The Architect's Revenge. The game was nearly complete, the story arc satisfying, the puzzles challenging but fair. Players would love it. His phone rang. An unknown number. Hello. Josh? It's Elaine Ballard, Myrna's friend. I remember. Hi, Elaine. I just wanted to call and, I don't know, apologize again for not telling you sooner about Myrna and Bill. I should have said something. You didn't know me that, Josh said. Loyalty to friends is complicated. Maybe, but what they did to you wasn't complicated. It was just wrong. She paused. Anyway, I also wanted to say that I'm impressed by how you handled everything. Most people would have just fallen apart or done something stupid. You stayed smart. I design puzzles for a living, Josh said. Solving them is what I do. Elaine laughed. Well, if you ever want to grab coffee and talk about something other than betrayal and revenge, let me know. I make a good sounding board. I might take you up on that. I hope you do. After hanging up, Josh returned to his game. The final scene showed the architect standing in an empty gallery, looking at blueprints of a new building, a future he'd created through patience, planning, and refusing to let others define his defeat. Josh saved the file and closed his laptop. The house was quiet, but it felt different now. Not empty, just waiting. Waiting for whatever came next. He walked to the kitchen and poured a drink, then raised the glass toward the empty room. To puzzle solved, he said aloud. And games won. The liquid caught the light, amber and warm. Josh drank, set down the glass, and smiled.